Can you speak a little bit about your process for testing for autism and some of the barriers that you experience when you're testing for children and adults?
Let me address the barriers issue
Hmm.
first. So, in
Okay.
general, I find a lot of people don't know about neuropsychological evaluations. So, that's definitely a big barrier, right? The second thing is that within our community, often we're very reluctant to address issues that have to do with mental health or with psychological problems. So, I would encourage people that definitely seek help. Your mind is just like your body, it's part of our whole body. And just like you would treat any physical illness, our brain is also a physical part of our body, and we want to make sure we're treating it. So it's very important to address those issues as quickly as we can, and especially with something like autism. So my interest in autism actually started because I started seeing a lot of adults who were having difficulty at work or were not progressing, and I did some training, and I now understand that often sometimes these issues are happening because of autism. And even though autism is diagnosed early in childhood, I think that speaks to the range of autism that we see. And so initially, to talk about autism, autism is a developmental disorder. So typically, we will see that in early childhood. But because autism has so many different levels, so we might not actually diagnose it in a child when they're before the age of 5. We tend to see more severe cases of autism diagnosed before, but children who are able to compensate or don't have very severe deficits, they often don't get diagnosed. So when we talk about autism, autism is something that has three aspects to it. So when you're diagnosing autism, you're not just looking at repetitive behaviors or looking at a child who might not want to socialize. You have to look at the whole picture. And so you're looking at whether a child has, firstly, deficits in social interaction, which means that are they able to make friendships? And are they able to maintain those friendships, right? Even within the household, are they able to express their social needs? Are they able to understand social needs? So it has to be in both those directions. It can't just be in one direction. And often, children with autism want to make friends. It's not something, I think it's a myth to think about that children with autism are not interested in social interactions or developing friendships. They do want to do that, but because of some problems with interaction and knowing how to interact and navigate that social behavior, that's where they're having more difficulty. The second thing we're looking at when we're diagnosing autism is whether they have any deficits in verbal or nonverbal communication. So, can they express their desire of what they want or what they need? And can they understand when other people are talking to them a certain way? Do they understand tones? Are they able to pick up on meanings that of things? Often in our communication, we talk about things in a way that is very dependent on how what our facial expression is or how we're using nonverbal behaviors. And can the child understand all of that? Because if they can't, then that counts as a deficit. And the last thing is that often with children with autism, we're seeing either they have a very restricted interest, so they want to talk about only one thing and they're not able to talk about other things, or they don't enjoy talking about other things. And then also they might have some repetitive movements. So very commonly, we'll see some flapping, or it can be a certain picking movement, or sometimes it's how they want to arrange things or do things in a in a specific sequence. So those are some of the criteria for autism, and the child has to meet all those criteria in order to be diagnosed. Now, there are, like I said, different levels of autism. Earlier, we used to have autism, and then we had something called Asperger's. Now, we just have autism
Mhm.
spectrum disorders, and that's
Mhm.
recognizing that it is a spectrum. And so
Mhm.
there's a lot of variability. And so somebody can have mild autism where they don't need as much support and they're able to function pretty independently on their own. Where also somebody can have moderate deficits, and that means that they might need some support. So for example, maybe they need an IEP and they need maybe extra help in the classroom or extra time, but they might not need a lot of extra support beyond that. And then there's the severe form where you might need more supports from the community. You might get some help from the regional center. So those are some of the different levels of autism. And sorry, and last thing that I want to say about that is that with autism, it's very important to get timely intervention and early intervention. We've seen good results from that. And so if it's diagnosed early on and the child gets a lot of intervention with social communication and ability to be able to modulate some of the behaviors, then we see very good results.
That was very informative. I actually took notes. I was like, this is such a great way that you explained to me and hopefully to our listeners and our viewers as well, because I would like to explain that to my clients as well, because this was really, really well explained and I really enjoyed it. So
when a child might show some autistic symptoms, we're very likely to say, oh, it's nothing. Let's just try and ignore it or it'll go away as they get older.